Let's talk some AMD. George Tsilis joins me, our senior markets correspondent, looking at the chip maker, living in NVIDIA's shadow and getting punished for it over the last couple months. So more likely that we would catch a bid in this one this afternoon, George. They did give some decent numbers here on the bottom line. Shares trading at 142 right now, so a little bit of a pop there. The earnings edged out expectations by like literally 1 cent. Might be enough for this stock, but revenue outlook pretty wide, man. Estimate was for $6.62 billion for the next quarter, the third quarter, and they're saying they could do between 6.4 and 7. So technically the midpoint for their outlook would be above what the analysts expected, but it's a pretty wide range. It's like a 9% range that they're giving.
It is, and I think if you look at the revenue range for the full fiscal year, it's between 6.4 and 7 billion. So it is a little bit higher than the previously estimated at the midpoint. But nonetheless, you're right. The range is a little bit lofty or a little bit wide. But I think I agree with you too. It has that feel like maybe you would see a recovery bounce in some of these names, like AMD. Overall, it was a pretty good quarter. They did talk about their data center revenue up about 115% year over year. So we're seeing some strong, top line sales in that segment, which is really their data processing unit segment, their inference technologies, which again, they're starting to encroach as a general purpose chipset on NVIDIA's business, but they're far away from their GPU technology. In other words, NVIDIA is far ahead of them in those areas of the AI ecosystem. But overall, a really good report. If you break down the numbers, 17% EPS year-over-year growth on 9% revenue growth year-over-year, higher revenue for next quarter, for full fiscal year, just slightly at the midpoint. They did talk about expense reduction. If you look at their gross margins, 53% for the quarter. They guided higher for the full year, 53.5%. If you look at the last 4 quarters, it was 50%. So I can see that they're actually growing efficiently just from those top line metrics from a margin standpoint. But I think right now there's still an apprehension, let's call it, to be fully engaged in hardware areas of the AI ecosystem, and that includes servers, Dell Technologies, Supermicro, Micron in the high bandwidth memory, AMD and NVIDIA in the inference and GPU technology. So my point is, it's an industry right now that's fallen out of favor. And again, we'll see how things trade for AMD in the morning, but right now it's catching a bid based on a pretty good report. Yeah.
All right. So look, 9% revenue growth. We just saw 15% from Microsoft. It's just hard for me to put this in the same category as NVIDIA the way everybody wants to. I mean, we were doing hundreds of % growth for NVIDIA for like a year almost. And then now, AMD trying to get in on this. I get they've got all that drag, so good 50% growth in client revenues. That's huge, but it's still a company in totality. And there's a bunch of stuff that's ailing in the look back in the mirror.
Yeah, that's the issue. And I think, here's the thing. I think the CPU business, and I'm going to throw Intel in that same space, that's a problem right now. If you look at AMD, they have about 30% of the CPU. This is the personal computing CPU and maybe some of the server business. But essentially 30% of market share globally, but 15% of that is China. And China has been really moving pretty aggressively in the CPU space because that's the next value-added upper scale technology that they're going to mass produce. So I think that's still a lingering issue for AMD. And I think that's why the stock has been retracing. I mean, this one's been coming down since you go back to, I believe, March or April. I think it was $225. So this is not a new phenomenon. Obviously, the last couple of weeks have been bad for the stock alongside the other major semis. But, I think if you look at the growth rates for AMD, 11% estimated. This is excluding the quarter they just reported. For the next 4 quarters, NVIDIA still estimates have it at 80%. And right now, going into this report, you're looking at 2024's earnings, they were fairly balanced in terms of valuation, around 40 times earnings.
Yeah.
But NVIDIA is growing, let's call it 6 to 8 times faster than AMD. So maybe there's a valuation pressure here as well.
Totally. I mean, NVIDIA's valuation much more reasonable. The fact that they trade at the same level is insane. Not even they're like not even in the same
Yeah,
ballpark. So, all right, thanks, George. Good assessment, good numbers.